Welcome back, and thank you for joining me today. In the book I'm going to be reading, it is about separation and divorce through the eyes of a child. And just like the title suggests, through the eyes of a child, it shows how the child feels when there is a rupture to the family. At the end of the book, the author has a little conversation that I will be reading as well. So I hope that you stick around for that part of the book too. The author is Jimena, Licitra, and Susana, Rosique. Let's get started. William was a happy little boy whose eyes were bright green, his favorite color. He lived in a greenhouse with a pretty little garden decorated with paper flowers. Flowers that he made from his mom and dad every year since he was born, and which smelled wonderful. When William got up in the morning, his dad would get his favorite breakfast ready for him, and his mom would fill his backpack with bananas with his name written on them, sandwiches with funny faces, or homemade cookies in the shape of a heart. But one day, William split in two. It happened all of a sudden. One night, his mom and dad sat down with him on the couch to tell him a story. But instead of being a story, it turned into a nightmare. And in the morning, when he woke up, William was torn into two pieces. He wasn't William anymore. He was Will and Liam. Will stayed with mom, and Liam stayed with dad. Will and Liam each had their own house. Will stayed in the greenhouse, which was now a very dark green indeed. But Liam moved to a huge blue apartment right at the very top of one of the biggest blocks in the city. From there, he could see the greenhouse far away on the horizon. It looked like a small, dark green dot. Now it was Will's mom who made him amazing breakfasts, in addition to filling his backpack with homemade cookies, chocolate cake, and bananas with his name written on them, or with funny pictures. She spent hours and hours with him, helping him with his homework, picking him up from school, and reading him stories. But Will felt sad, like something was missing, and he cried all the time. He cried so much that now his eyes had turned as blue as the deepest sea. Liam's dad also made great breakfasts and learned to get his backpack ready for school with sandwiches with funny faces and delicious cakes he baked every night when he came home from work. He spent loads of time with Liam, but it still wasn't enough. Liam also felt sad and incomplete, and he cried all the time. He cried so much that he didn't have any tears left to cry, and now his eyes were as pale as the desert sands. In an effort to brighten things up, Will's mom decided to paint the house a different color. She and Will chose a beautiful yellow. Now the house was full of light. It was as if the walls of the house had swallowed the sun. But Will was still sad, with eyes the color of the sea. Liam's dad decorated the blue apartment with paper flowers they'd made together using pencils and watercolors. They were really beautiful flowers, but they didn't have the scent of his mom that Liam missed so much. And Liam was still sad, with eyes the color of sand. Will and Liam weren't as happy as when they'd been just one little boy. Their parents didn't know how to make them smile again. They took them to the movies and bought them toy cars, jigsaw puzzles, and costumes of their favorite characters, but it didn't work. They smothered them in kisses and gave them bear hugs, but it didn't work. So, Will's mom and Liam's dad decided it was time to fix things. They agreed to have both of the boys at the same time to see if they could bring back the happy little boy who lived in the greenhouse. On Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, Will's mom sewed up the two halves. On Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, Liam's dad stuck them together with glue and try and make them whole. But the stitches always came loose, and there was never enough glue to keep the two halves together. With mom and dad doing things separately, Will and Liam will never get back together again. Although William's mom and dad loved their son, they couldn't all live together. So one day they decided to join forces so that William's two halves would join together forever and ever. They didn't just hand William and Liam over to each other in silence. Instead, they spent a few minutes chatting about what they'd been up to during the days they hadn't been with him. They made the most of the moments they spent together, and mom sewing and dad gluing at the same time. With every day that went by, Will and Liam felt they were getting closer and closer together, and after a few weeks, they were joined right back into one. Now William had two homes, a beautiful yellow house and a bright blue apartment with great views. But his mom and dad still loved him just the way they always had. And you could see it in his bright green eyes, William's favorite color. That is the end of the book, and the author has a note on the next page that I'll also be reading. I'm one of those children whose parents separated, and I had to live between two homes. My mother lived in a small apartment while my father lived in a house with a garden. Everything about my life was in two halves. Half of the weekends with one, the other half with the other. Half of the holidays with one, the other half with the other. Half of my clothes in one place, the other half in another. Half of my brothers and sisters in one house, the other half in the other. I have half brothers and sisters on both sides, but they always been complete brothers and sisters to me. When I grew up, I realized that the fact that my parents had split up and hardly spoke to each other didn't mean that I'd been split in two, even though sometimes I felt like two different little girls. The idea was lingering in my mind until I was finally inspired by a little girl with green eyes. A little girl who, in the same way as William, seemed to have split into two different children, one who went off with her daddy and another who stayed with her mom. It was as if she were meant to share out all of her love in equal measure. And if the silence between her parents had marked out a dividing line that a part of her couldn't cross, Mommy's little girl didn't take her experiences with her when she went to stay with her daddy. Daddy's little girl let everything that lived in her second home right there. Sooner or later, all of us who are children of parents who have separated join and two halves back together again. Sometimes we do it on our own. It takes us longer, but it does happen. And sometimes thanks to our parents communicating with each other. Feeling whole again allows us to feel happy, and although our parents have separated, we have to remember that they are the ones who have split up, not us, the children. So I hope you enjoy this book. I know it is a heavy topic to talk about divorce or separation, but looking at it through the eyes of that child and how that child could feel like they are broken up into two. So how can the adults or the caregivers in that child's world work together, either to join forces or to talk with that child to make them feel whole again? Because you want them to have strong relationships in their lives. And a lot of times those get modeled inside of a household or two households or three households, depending on what the family dynamic is. And it's always important, if you're feeling like this is a hard topic and you feel like there is a child who could be needing some support, reach out to a counselor for them to talk to. Sometimes even family therapy is a good choice as well. I hope you enjoyed this book, and I look forward to you stopping by my channel for other social emotional learning books and other topics related to children and counseling. Take care.